Hello, hello, yeah. Hello, good morning, everybody. Still awake? Had a good sleep? So, yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Before we start, let me quickly introduce ourselves when we're going to talk about ESG. My name is Floris Assis. I'm Dutch, but I lived more than half my life abroad. And what entitles me to talk about ESG today, well, I didn't have any formal training in this, but my passion started around 2020 when I had the chance. I've traveled quite a bit already, and I've seen poverty, I've seen inequality in those things, and it realized how privileged I was. And that really gave me a passion for the topic, and well, which we go deeper into in the next half an hour. And I have the honor to talk about this with Gabor, who is a veteran in sitting on stage. This is my first time, so please be gentle. Gabor,
Yes,
please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabor Helenbai, and I'm a counsel at the international law firm of Taylor Wessing. I'm sitting in the Budapest office, and I'm dealing in the gaming sector more than 15 years. But I have only started to deal with ESG matters in the recent years, and it was not a conscious or direct decision on my side, because I think, as you do, or you did, you have encountered in many ways in your day-to-day operation or work to ESG matters, even if you don't know about it. My journey started with advising on green lease agreements, and then it came to dealing with carbon emission restrictions in relation to the real estate sector, and then came GDPR and all this stuff. So slowly but steady, all these ESG-related matters come to life. Due to the heavy regulation of the EU, now it's not only a soft law requirement, but also a very strict and imperative rules that have to be complied with if you are dealing even in the gaming industry. Just to have a short background introduction. What is ESG? ESG is a reporting tool to assess the company's risks and opportunities relating to environment, government, and social impacts. The whole story started with the EU Green Deal back in 2019 when it was introduced, which set very ambitious goals to reach by 2015. And in order to reach these goals, the EU also implemented first the non-financial reporting directive, which only affected a very few amount of companies, only the large companies in the EU, about 11,000 companies throughout the 28 countries in the EU. But it was not really effective, because in this reporting requirement, the companies had to introduce their environmental, social, and governance-related strategy, the achievements, and the results, but it was not in a standardized form, so it was very difficult to compare between different companies, and it was these reports were not really available, because for some obvious and not obvious reasons, the companies hide it in the last corner of their website. So the next step was that last year the European Union introduced the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which dramatically raised the bar and put much more much more obligations on the companies to report, including their ESG strategy and defining very standardized way to report on their results. And it also introduced a double materiality assessment procedure, and Floris is a great expert of this issue, because he has a very nice article about this issue.
Expert is a big word. I don't want to give me to that. But must have been nervous a little bit more about my introduction. So I'm passionate about the topic, but I come from affiliate marketing. I'm a marketeer. And I've been doing that since 2016, mainly as search engine optimization. And I always had, since 2018, I've been running my own agency, doing it mainly for the Dutch market, but also for other markets and mainly casino affiliates. And a lot of, over the years, clients came to me or colleagues and they said, like, you're doing it good for your clients, why don't you start your own affiliate website? And knowing how hard and difficult the industry is, I was like, I will maybe at some point when I have a very good niche. And this is where my passion for sustainability and my knowledge and experience in affiliate marketing came together. In 2020, I started working on my own website, which is called Better World Casinos. And what I do there is I review, at the moment, mainly operators, but in the future also providers and regulators and other stakeholders on their ESG performance. So before we go into the whole detail of what is ESG, I quickly want to ask in the audience, how well do you consider your knowledge? How familiar are you with ESG? If you could raise your hand if you think you have a good understanding of the topic, just for us to get an idea of how well we should, how we should target our talk. Okay, so that's, well, of course, two hands I see raised. Okay, so we're gonna go a bit more into the details of what ESG actually is. Another question, just to measure the room, how important do you think ESG? Do you think ESG is important for you? One, two, a bit more hands. Okay, good one. I see some heads moving. Good, good. And a third question is, who has already encountered ESG in their roles, in their position? Anybody already felt like, I know you, I've seen you speaking last time. I forgot your name, sorry, but I know you're an expert on the topic, so he's gonna be checking everything I say and later on be giving me notes. Please, please do. It's always stuff to learn. So, okay, good to know. So then we're gonna keep it a very general introduction. You already mentioned a lot of things. You've mentioned the Green Deal in EU, the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive introduced this year. So the big companies, as of the end of this year, need to start reporting. There, of course, have been reporting rules already in the past, especially the public companies needed to make it part of their annual reporting. So it's not completely new, but it's definitely getting momentum.
Yeah, and why companies have to deal with the ESG matters, I think there's a twofold initiative. One is the legislative initiative, which is obvious. And certainly, as I mentioned, only about 50,000 companies are under the scope of the CSRD legislation. But the other initiative is coming a kind of market expectation, and which means that all the stakeholders participating in the ecosystem, meaning the shareholders, the clients, the suppliers, the customers, have some kind of expectation and reveal that building a sustainable company is not only good for that particular shareholder, but for the whole ecosystem. Because if you are setting up a very realistic but realizable ESG strategy, that creates value for all stakeholders in the ecosystem. It generates more profit for the shareholders. It makes a more safer way to gamble for the client, and etc., etc. So I think.
Yeah. So ESG, environment, social, and governance, or better, environment sustainable, social responsible, and governance or ethical governance. And ethical is a topic which is. Let me frame it this way. What I find very interesting about the topic is to talk about with people in the industry is we are here for business, right? Business is about making money. But with sustainability and ESG, we're going to touch a topic which some people are maybe not as comfortable with. And the reason why we make money or why we do business, is it all profit maximization? Because if you want to maximize your profit, then you also always have an incentive to take shortcuts and to make decisions that are maybe not as favorable for the environment, for your employees, for society, for community. So it's something that it's not only money. I mean, this is also how it's been framed over the last year, and we've seen also last year, maybe for those familiar with it, BlackRock started to distance themselves a little bit from ESG because it started to be framed really like a tick box exercise, and it's only about investments. No, for me personally, and I'm very curious to hear your answer on that, ESG is a mindset. Why do we do the things we do? We are in iGaming, we produce entertainment. People want to play and want to have a good time in a responsible way that doesn't create problems for them. But in the same way, if I would ask you, or if you would ask any of your colleagues, why did you join this industry? To make great entertainment? Or because there's a lot of good money involved in it? Which, honestly, for me, I accidentally came into the business in 2016. My wife was pregnant, I was made redundant in another job, and there was this opportunity, and I thought, like, okay, I have nothing with gambling, but it's a good pay, I will be able to get good care for my family. And I really enjoyed it. I never really enjoyed marketing because I thought you have to create incentive for people to buy your product. But SEO is very organic. People already have an incentive to look what you're offering, and you just have to make sure that your communication is answering their query. So this is how I came into the business. But everybody has their own reasons, and this is something that, if we talk about sustainability, this is things we can ponder.
Yeah. I have two thoughts in connection with what you have said. I think the art of making or creating a sustainable business is balancing between as you mentioned, the short-term goals and the long-term goals.
Which financial sustainable,
Yeah, I mean, and it comes here when we are talking about profit maximization.
My favorite topic.
On what term would you like to maximize your profit if it's your goal at the end of the day? And the other thing is that I read somewhere that those companies who are dealing with ESG matters as a compliance or CSR issue and only ticking the box is not taking care of business itself, because it's a series of business decisions, and it's not itself a compliance issue. So if you want to build a sustainable, long-lasting, profitable company, you have to deal with ESG matters.
It's interesting that regulation and that it becomes a compliance thing. It's a conversation I had last year that the person was very skeptical about the whole implementation of the CSRD, the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, because it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of time to do an audit and to audit your emissions and your scope and your equality strategies and inclusion, all these things. Which in a big company, should take at least a full-time, maybe 2 FTEs. So we're already talking about quickly 100,000 euros, which you could easily spend in actually being more sustainable, or in doing in a campaign or in recruiting. But what it does demand is self-reflection. Is people to start, okay, we now have to set maybe a limit to, okay, how much is this going to cost us? How much are we willing to invest in this? And then start making decisions. And this is where we make a nice bridge to materiality and materiality assessment. So just do another question just to keep you awake. Materiality, everybody who's familiar with materiality? Maybe, yes, okay. So material is something is it relevant? Does it have effect of you? So single materiality is what we've been doing actually over the last 10 years, and is practice in risk assessment anyway. So Things are changing in the environment, things are changing in the economy. What effect does it have on my business? Is there a risk involved, and should I take measures? You develop your strategy. Double materiality is what effect do I have on the environment and on the community and society. And then triple materiality, my favorite, you have to go to the highest level, set the bar high, is how does that interact with each other? Which synergies do it create? The effects from the outside forces come on you and the other way around. And this sometimes happened and I lost my train of thought. This is why I'm very happy I'm not alone, sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in that I'm not sure that why we have to, what is the exact obligation, what we are talking about, this reporting obligation for the companies. This obligation is that you have to prepare based on the double materiality assessment, you have to prepare your sustainability strategy and make a report about this and include it into your financial statement along with the management report. And it should be published along with your annual financial statement. So it's not what you can avoid. So you have to put efforts to prepare this report in a proper way. It couldn't just be a side exercise, and that's why. And we were talking about double materiality assessment, which is a very serious, or should be a complex process.
So I think we've got a baseline, okay, ESG, so we talk about environment, social and governance, the impact that it has on you, that you have on it, on the environment and social and governance. But then that's a very broad topic. Each letter, environment, social and governance, I can talk about for days, which is very good that we only have a limited time. Let me just see, we're 10 minutes more. But then what topics, what specific topics? And this is where the materiality assessment, so again, materiality is what has effect, use it to analyze which topics you're going to look into. So with environment, for example, what is your emissions and what impact do you have on biodiversity? And well, in our sector, the hosting providers, how much energy do they use? How do they cool their machines? Your office space,
your waste management.
Your waste management, your devices, your computers, all these things you can plan to do more or less sustainable. Social, so how do you hire? How do you deal with players? Of course, the most material topic is responsible gambling, which is rightfully so. That's if we don't take care of our players and we cause a lot of damage and harm in society, then well, that becomes an ethical issue. So that's rightfully, but it's being discussed a lot already. So personally, I don't focus a lot on it because a lot of people more experienced in it already talk a lot about it. And then and the governance part. So, and I think it should be GES or GS, because governance is where everything happens. It's what is the company culture and the values and everything which you make your decisions with, and how you eventually decide how much resources are we going to spend on this. Transparency.
Anti-money laundering, tax transparency, and all this stuff.
So these are the most material that you will find. If I have, as Gabon pointed out earlier, I have an extensive article on my website about this, but I did a comparison. So the Malta Gaming Authority launched their ESG Code of Conduct last September, which I reviewed, and I compared that with the materiality assessment of a couple of big public ones, so Entain, Kindred, Betson. So I've compared those together, and what you see in the most top right quadrant, so in a matrix you see so least important and high important and low impact, high impact. So the one that's high impact, high importance, you will see of course responsible gambling, then the technology, the privacy side, so are you data security in these things.
Cyber security, data security.
Yeah. And then more to the other quadrants you will see, and this is interesting to see how companies give priority to these things, and also who they involve in the assessment. Do they only look at themselves? Because this assessment you can do for your company, but for your providers, for your players, for your regulators, and everybody will prioritize things in different ways. So this is a next evaluation or a review that I will do to see how different stakeholders would materialize different topics.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting question how different sectors prioritize their assessment and materiality. As I mentioned, I'm also working in the real estate sector, which where we can see that most players in the real estate sector are focusing highly on the E part, the environmental part of the priorities, which in the gaming industry and especially in the online gambling industry, it's for obvious reasons not less important, but we had a very interesting discussion this morning about it's underestimated in the online gaming industry, the environmental priorities. So we don't have to. So we shouldn't forget the requirements, for example, sustainable IT infrastructures and commuting of the employees to the office and back. And there are very, very widespread aspects of the environmental part which shouldn't came into our mind at first thing.
Yeah, it's nice that you pointed out. I think it was a very interesting talk that we had about it this morning. What it came from the point, everybody, you might be aware of your carbon footprint. Hands up if you ever filled in one of those assessments online and you can assess like, okay, and you should eat less meat and fly less, etc., because your carbon footprint. It's a very interesting, I see some head nodding. You know who invented that, where that came from? It was BP at the end of the 80s. That thought like, ooh, climate change is happening and stuff, and but we're not to blame. Well, actually, they knew they were from the 50s, 60s, but they thought like, no, let's make the consumer feel guilty about themselves. So we give them this tool that they can and distract them, you know. So I went to this phase a couple of years ago that I really thought like, oh, I feel guilty and bad about the environment and I need to change. I'm part of the problem. So I thought like, okay, I love eating meat. It's okay, the organic meat and organic degradable cleaning products and all these things, and it's cost a lot of money. So at some point I thought like, okay, I cannot afford this. But what's the impact I'm having? Psst, it's a drop on a hot plate, you know, you're not having any impact. The only impact you're having is that you're supporting companies that make products and try to do things in a better way, and that has an impact. But on the grander scale of things, you don't have an impact. We need to have the discussion about what's the cause, what's the root of the problem. Now, to go back to environmental, and you said that.
No, I just wanted to add that what you said that, and how you can decide and evaluate which company are you supporting by buying its product. For example, the ESG report is one tool. If you check the website of the company, if it has an ESG report, then you can go through and think through whether this company is creating a sustainable business, and not only from environmental point of view, but social and governance point of view. So that's also aim of this whole regulation, to have a broad and holistic approach about these topics, because to tell the truth, most of the elements of the E and S and G materiality already existed before we invented E and S and the ESG regulation. But the difference is that now we have to deal all this stuff with in a holistic approach. And for example, it also a question how companies deal with these ESG matters as a complex case, and not only diversifying these matters in different directories, for example, in the HR department, the legal and compliance department, the finance department. So it's also a challenge what big companies have to deal with.
But it's definitely a challenge. But the problems that need to be solved in ESG and the reporting stuff are not that difficult, you know? I mean, the problems that you guys are solving in your day-to-day work are probably a lot harder. So it's not a thing that we cannot do ESG, or we don't know how to do it. Now we know it's. Are you willing to do the things that needs to be done and have the conversation that you need to have with the people that are involved in your company? And do you have a nice company culture where these things can be discussed? And if you work for a company where it's only about money, and you're like, oh, but, no, shareholders, and then it's going to be a very difficult conversation to have. But you should have it nevertheless, because, well, the world is changing very rapidly. As I mentioned, I can talk about this for a very long time, but I really want to know, we're almost there. Any questions? Just anybody like, but what about this and how about that? Yes, please. Is your name Gustav? Yes, I remember. Good. I saw you at the SBC. So now I know now comes a tough question, because this man knows what he's talking about.
Thank you, Flores. I am far from an ESG expert, but I would like to ask you, as actually being experts on the field. In my jurisdiction, Sweden, but also in many other jurisdictions, I note that many financial institutions, investors, owners, that they are abandoning our industry, the gambling industry, because of ESG. Is there a way back to attract those investors? How can we work with that topic to make it to make it possible that ESG is not a reason to abandon the gambling market as an investor? Thank you.
Yeah, and now we're going to go into the... You want to say something first before I do my long list? Now we're going to reach about the topic of ethics, and what I personally love, it's marketing and storytelling. How do you frame this? The gambling industry is actually very similar. I draw a lot of similarities with alcohol, with the alcohol industry, which has been around a lot longer compared to online gambling. I mean, gambling has been around a long time, but online gambling very recent, 25 years maybe, 30. How do we get people back? Well, investors, what they want is they want a return on investment. The known secret in our industry is that a lot of our revenue comes from problem gambling. That's very sad, but that's true. Something we need to work on. But on the other hand, if you frame the story that gambling is entertainment, it's always been around. It will always be around. There will always be people that want to gamble, and make sure that regulate it and offer it in a regulated way where there is space for debate and discuss it and see how we can do it the best way. And to come back to a point I made earlier, we have to focus on the entertainment element. You can be a sustainable entertainment company. There is this a method called asterisk. It's how you rate, evaluate the risk factor of different games. And bingo and lottery are the lowest risk factor. We can take elements from this and implement them in new kinds of other kinds of entertainment, and build different products where the focus is on entertainment with a little bit of risk and you know, the gambling aspect in it, or sports betting, and so if you're gonna be creative in the product that you offer and how you offer it and what incentive you offer, I think you can tell a genuine story and in that way get investors along to invest again. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the answer to your question could be probably this newly adopted reporting system, because in that way, and as I mentioned in the beginning of our discussion, that there's a market demand as well, not only legal requirements to make these kind of reports. If you do your homework, you set up a proper ESG strategy and build up a sustainable company in a transparent way and report this by year, and the important thing is with ESG reporting is not only you have to imply your strategy, but you have to follow up the results as well. So if investors can see that you have reached the goals and
making progress,
that will, I think, make more confidence in the investors that it's not, the gaming industry is not as bad as they thought.
I think the reporting brings a lot of transparency, and with transparency comes accountability. And if we show progress through those tools, then why is it a worse market than alcohol? I mean, there's plenty of public alcohol companies that have investors. So, anybody else? Oh, yes. You want the mic?
Hi. I'm wondering if you have a sense of how many gambling companies are going to be captured at the moment by the reporting directive. Like, how many companies are going to be obliged in the gambling world to report? And then more generally, if you think the EU might expand that requirement to capture more of the industry.
You know the numbers by heart?
Not the number of companies, but...
Well, I know the number of companies, but I know the requirement for this year.
Yeah, it's 40 million euros turnover and or 20 million euros assets and or 250 employees.
And that bar is lowered every year. So these companies, so the big ones, and then you say like which companies? So companies, for example, in the UK, because they target also EU players, they have to comply already. It's not that they can wait because, we're outside of the EU. No. They have to comply because they're players and their revenue comes from EU, so they have to comply in order to.
Yeah, and these are only the mandatory applicable EU regulation. But for example, you mentioned the Malta Gaming Authority's Code of Conduct, which is not a mandatory one, but
True.
Applicable to...
Not yet, I hope.
But highly recommended to companies having license under the Maltese law.
Yeah. Just do I have 1 more minute, Zoltan? Yes. Thank you very much. So why do this thing? So on the long term, it's a profit thing, but why? How does it make profit? Well, I've identified 3 pillars. The player. Does the player want sustainable companies? Well, actually, matter of fact, they do. KPMG did a big research last year, which is also being used by the MGA Code of Conduct, which they refer to, where they did a survey among Generation Z. And brand image becomes more and more important, not only for the clothes you buy and the holiday you take and those things, but also for the games and the online brands that they choose for. So yes, they have indicated that players in Gen Z are looking for brands that do more than others, so there's one. Then the second pillar is, of course, compliance and regulation, and with CSRD and others coming along, either mandatory or voluntarily, as the Malta Gaming Authority, do help. But thirdly, and we should not underestimate, recruitment. The Gen Z, the joke is Gen Z doesn't want to work. Well, they do want to work, but they want to work for companies that have a heart, that do something, that don't only make money, but that offer something extra. So they want to work for companies that have an ESG strategy and that have clear values and communicate and are proud of these. So they have they can be proud of working for a certain company. So don't forget this, that over the last couple of years in Malta, I've lived in Malta for 4.5 years, and allegedly there were every year like about 5,000 vacancies in the industry that they couldn't be filled. So it's hard to recruit people of talent and with the right skill set, and then they don't only look at the salary, which was something that Arthur mentioned earlier in the previous talk. They look for companies that they want to work for, and yeah, so food for thought. I think we've managed.
Thank you, guys.
On the spot, bit overtime. Sorry.
All right, so I will be the devil's advocate over here and say that Gen Z doesn't know what they want, by the way. And with all this ESG stuff, yeah, it's going to be probably similar with the cookies and everything, that they're just going to click OK, we don't care about it.
Yeah, but that's what we were talking about, that don't miss the chance to take it as a compliance issue, but it's actually a business issue.
It's also marketing and everything. All right, thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Zoltan.
Thank you.